Well, hello everyone. My name is Wilson Green, and I'm a fellow and staff attorney with the Disaster Relief Project at Legal Aid of North Carolina. And if you don't already know, Legal Aid of North Carolina is a statewide nonprofit legal organization that provides free legal services for certain civil matters. And in particular, the Disaster Relief Project provides assistance to survivors of natural disasters in North Carolina, in addition to supporting community economic development in disaster impacted communities throughout the state. And while a lot of our work revolves around assisting specific individual survivors of natural disasters, by applying to federal, state, or local disaster relief programs, we also assist nonprofits and long-term recovery groups that work to alleviate the effects of disasters in their own local communities. And one way in which we hope to kind of support these local community groups is by providing them with trainings and resources that might kind of help them be more effective in their work. So as such, this is the second video in a series that our team is providing for those who are specifically interested in creating nonprofit organizations that are focused on disaster relief, or maybe already are involved or have already created disaster relief nonprofits or long-term recovery groups. My colleague, Brad Pyland, who's also a staff attorney with our project, recently recorded a video explaining some of the things that you would want to think about when deciding whether or not to become kind of a formal 501c3 nonprofit. And this video, the video I'm recording now, is for folks who, after thinking through the considerations that Brad talked about, have decided to go forward with creating a nonprofit. So specifically, I'm going to try to provide a relatively short introduction, very basic introduction of how a nonprofit is incorporated in North Carolina, in addition to the potential benefits of creating these types of groups as related to disaster relief. But before I start, I'll just say two quick disclaimers. This is just a general overview. For those of you looking for more specific instructions, please see the resources on our website that's listed at the bottom of this slide. We'll also be doing videos, similar videos in the future that might cover other more specific topics than this. And lastly, I'll note that this presentation, it's not intended to be legal advice. We're not your lawyer. Instead, it's just a general overview of formation of a nonprofit, maybe some of the legal issues you might run into. But if you watch this and have a specific legal question or wish to receive legal assistance with your existing disaster relief group, or you want to start an organization, please feel free to call the helpline at the number below. You can visit our website, like I said, and see some of the resources or see how you can get in contact with us. So often the term nonprofit is used kind of broadly as a catch-all for many types of organizations. In fact, in our world of disaster relief, we sometimes hear the term being used pretty loosely to refer to any kind of organized group that has been formed to serve, a community purpose. In most cases, helping folks who have suffered from natural disaster, who have suffered from hurricanes or the like. However, when we use the term nonprofit, we specifically mean a 501c3 nonprofit. That's kind of what we at the team refer to when we use the term, which essentially is just a legal entity that has been incorporated according to state law and received special tax status from the IRS under Section 501c3 of the tax code. So in other words, a group might refer to itself as a nonprofit, but it isn't necessarily a true kind of legally recognized nonprofit, or a nonprofit that receives this special kind of tax status. And kind of the basis of this video is to go through 4 really broad steps that are necessary for forming a nonprofit with 501c3 status in North Carolina, each of which I'm going to cover in a little bit more detail. So the first step would be to file articles of incorporation with the state of North Carolina, specifically with the Secretary of State's office. This is kind of the way you formally incorporate or register your organization with the state. And once you've filed these articles of incorporation, you'll want to kind of internally organize your organization. The most obvious way to do this is to adopt bylaws and other kind of related internal policies that will govern how your group functions on a day-to-day basis. Next, you should typically apply for 501c3 status with the IRS, which carries certain benefits that I'll kind of detail at the end of this presentation. And lastly, you should apply for a state charitable solicitation license from the North Carolina Secretary of State, which I'll talk about soon. This is kind of the rough sequential order that you typically would want to consider when creating an organization, a 501c3 nonprofit. And maybe it goes without saying, but there are many other specific requirements and considerations in this whole process that depend on a host of factors. Whether you're going to hire employees for your organization, whether you're going to own property, whether you the amount of money that your organization is going to hold at any time, the assets it might have, all these different factors, and depending on the circumstances of your organization, are going to affect the other steps that might be necessary for creating these organizations and maintaining them. And so like this presentation could definitely last for hours. And so as I noted before, there are more detailed resources on our website that's listed below throughout this presentation. And always you can feel free to call us with any questions you have. So the first step, registering with the state, the articles of incorporation. The first step is basically just to file these with the North Carolina Secretary of State's office. Articles of incorporation are basically the founding document of your organization. It's the document that's going to lay out the name of your group, its fundamental mission and purpose. Maybe the people who are involved on the front end. Those are going to, the folks that are going to help incorporate, even like the mailing address for your organization. All of this is going to be laid out in the articles. And it's important to note that the articles of incorporation, they aren't put in a document that you organically create yourself. Rather, the articles are created by filling them out on a sort of application with the Secretary of State's office. You can find this application, this kind of fillable PDF document on the Secretary of State's website, which is listed there. So you can submit it online through their website. You can print it out and mail it in. And you'll basically just fill it out, each box. Like I said, it'll list the organization's name, the mission, all kinds of basic facts about it. And then you'll submit it with a $60 filing fee, which is a one-time fee. This is something you only have to do once. And then basically once it's all accepted, your organization is incorporated in perpetuity. And it's worth noting that as you begin to think about forming your organization, it's definitely a good idea to go ahead and look at this application that's listed on the Secretary of State's website. It'll help you brainstorm, the different things that you'll need to know and be thinking about in incorporating, like who do you want involved in your organization? How do you articulate its fundamental mission or purpose and things like that? So yeah, once that's done, the next thing you'll want to start doing is thinking about how to organize your organization. Basically, the main document that organizes your organization will be the bylaws, or a document that's laying out the bylaws. The bylaws are essentially the constitution of your organization. If the articles, which I just talked about, lay out the really basic features of your nonprofit, like its name and its mission and things like that. The bylaws are more the operating manual. It details the overarching ways in which the organization will function and will govern itself. So, for example, I've listed some of the things that the bylaws might lay out. The size of your board of directors and how it'll kind of function for the organization. I'll quickly say that North Carolina law requires you to only have at least just one board member for your organization. Best practices would recommend probably closer to 5, if not maybe even 10 board members, and that's something we'll probably address in a later video. In addition, the bylaws might talk about the duties of your directors and officers. These are the folks that kind of help with the day-to-day running of your organization. They might talk about the rules and procedures for holding meetings, for electing folks, for appointing officers to your organization, things like that. Conflict of interest policies, they might lay those out. Importantly, how grant and donation monies might be distributed and utilized. Thinking about how contributions to your organization will be allocated and what they will go to, and pretty much anything else that's essential to governing your organization. It's important to note that if you're involved in a nonprofit, if you helped incorporate one, if you're a board member, an officer, what have you, you have a duty to understand and to know these bylaws. This is not really an option. You can't simply disregard the constitution of your organization. And moreover, revising them later shouldn't be taken lightly. So we definitely highly encourage you to give thought and serious thought to drafting and adopting your bylaws. It can be especially helpful to reach out to other nonprofits, existing nonprofits that might have a similar mission to your own, so you can review their bylaws and see how they've kind of organized. So say you're creating a disaster relief long-term recovery group in your county, it might be good to look if there's a similar group in a county nearby, to see how they've kind of organized their bylaws, so you can think about how to draft your own. The third step is to apply for tax exempt status with the IRS. And technically speaking, this is not actually a necessary step for being recognized as an incorporated nonprofit under North Carolina law. Rather, 501c3 status is an IRS, a federal designation. And as explained at the end of this presentation, there are certain benefits that come with this status. And it kind of, as such, many, if not most, nonprofits do end up filing for this status or a similar status to enjoy the benefits that come with it. There are many kind of basic initial essentials that are needed before qualifying for this status. Your organization cannot be organized for private interests. It can't participate in different kinds of political activities. It has to be organized for an exempt purpose, like charitable or religious or scientific reasons. You can't have private shareholders. You also need to apply for an employer identification number with the IRS. Even if you're not going to be hiring employees, that's a number that's used to identify your organization when you're applying for 501c3 status. And a list of all these requirements can be found on the IRS's website. They kind of list them out. And if these basic requirements are met, you can apply for 501c3 status typically by filling out a 1023 form with the IRS, which can be found on their website. I listed that as well. And I'll go ahead and say the 1023 form, if you've ever seen it or if you take a quick look at it, you'll quickly realize it's a pretty comprehensive document. I think it's around 30 pages. And so it's not really something you can just sit down and quickly fill out in a single afternoon or something like that. In fact, I was reading earlier, the IRS estimates that well over 100 hours may be required to adequately prepare a 1023, especially if the applicant doesn't seek the advice of an expert like a CPA or maybe an attorney. So while the articles of incorporation that need to be filed with the Secretary of State are pretty straightforward, they're just basic things. That's on one side. On the other end is the 1023 form, which can be really pretty complicated. In some cases, an organization might be able to file the 1023 EZ, which is much less comprehensive. It's a lot shorter, but there's certain kind of qualifications that I won't get into for you to be able to fill out the EZ form. Either way, it's easy to get lost in applying for 501c3 status. There are definitely resources that you can find online that might give you step-by-step assistance, kind of with each section of the form. But obviously, a resource found on the internet is not always going to address every question or issue that you might encounter during your own specific filing process. So this is, like I said, it can be really helpful with this form to seek the assistance of a qualified CPA, an attorney, and so we definitely suggest reaching out to a professional if need be, and specifically if your potential nonprofit is specifically interested in focusing on disaster relief, somebody from our team might be able to help you with this form. And then lastly, I'll quickly mention that after incorporating your nonprofit, organizing its structure with bylaws, and filing for tax exempt status with the IRS if you choose to do so, the last general step for new nonprofits in North Carolina is to apply for a state charitable solicitation license, which is also which you also apply for through the Secretary of State's office. Under North Carolina law, an organization or person that intends to directly solicit contributions or donations to their organization, or even intends to hire someone to solicit contributions on their behalf, anybody who does this must first obtain a license from the charities division of the Secretary of State's office. Since most nonprofits do ultimately seek contributions or donations to function, most will have to apply for this license and renew their license every year. Technically, only nonprofits that are raising $25,000 or more in one calendar year actually need this license and need to renew it. But even if you receive less than 25,000 or expect to receive less than $25,000 in contributions or donations, you'll still need to apply to the Secretaries of State's office to be exempt from the license. And then lastly, I'll just quickly go through the benefits of specifically obtaining 501c3 nonprofit status. If you watch Brad Pylan's video, as I mentioned before, he went through some of this as well. Basically, you may wonder whether it's worth going through all the work necessary. As I mentioned, even the 1023 form could take 100 hours or more of work. But there are specific benefits that comes with all this. Maybe the most obvious one is that with this special tax status, you are exempt from federal income tax. And somewhat similarly, in some circumstances, donations to your organization from donors are tax deductible for those donors, which obviously serves as an incentive to them, to people, to donate to your organization. And in a similar vein, 501c3 status is necessary to receive certain types of grants. Most grant makers, whether they provide federal, state, local, or like foundation-based grants, most of them require that a nonprofit applicant have 501c3 status. This is not, it's not always the case, but there's no doubt that having this status really opens up the field to the types of grants that you might apply for to kind of keep your organization going. And lastly, it's less concrete, but I definitely think that this status can provide and can kind of help your reputation, in the community, in the state. Most people, I think it's fair to say that most people in the general public have maybe a somewhat basic view of what a 501c3 is, or at least heard that term before. And so even if they don't know the specific ins and outs of this tax status, many will lend credibility to your organization if it has that status. So that's nonprofit or incorporation in a nutshell. I'll mention kind of for the last time that if you're specifically looking for help with your existing or soon to be nonprofit that is geared towards disaster relief in North Carolina, please contact us. We might be able to help you with any legal issues you have, or just general issues you run into as you're seeking to incorporate or apply for 501c3 status. Our attorneys assist groups with incorporation, as I mentioned. They help legal documents. They can help provide general guidance as you seek to navigate this whole disaster relief ecosystem. And so you can reach us at that number, 1-866-219-5262. And you can also visit our website. The website listed there goes directly to our page that is geared towards nonprofits and long-term recovery groups. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Please stay safe, and definitely be looking out for future videos that are covering topics related to this.